secrets.
Well, that's right, Joe. And the diminishing of what potentially was a crime here is already disturbing. It's already happening. We see people making light of it who are in Trump's orbit or former orbit. And they're making the rounds right now, trying to convince the American people that it's just not that big of a deal. And, that also puts pressure on the authorities not to go forward with a prosecution. And I think we need to start talking a lot more about the cost of not prosecuting if there is a crime that needs to be prosecuted. Because if we don't hold a president accountable, then what we're sending, the message that we're sending, obviously, is that this is not a democracy, but that this is actually a land where the president of the United States is above the law and gets to do whatever he or she wants to. It's funny because I sent my 5-year-old goddaughter off to school, to kindergarten for the first time last weekend, and she literally asked me, she said, "Tia Mara," she said, "why does Donald Trump need so many lawyers?" And then she said, "What is the difference between a king and a president?" And I said, "You cannot send a king to jail." And we're going to find out now whether Donald Trump really is above the law or not.
That is the question. Again, it's worth restating. We're not arguing whether or not he took documents that don't belong to him. Donald Trump doesn't deny that. He took them. And day by day, we find out what exactly these documents are, and it doesn't get better. It appears to get a little bit worse every time something is revealed. So the question may not be what to do. It may be how to do it, because I don't know how this country moves forward without some sort of consequence to taking national security secrets, removing documents from the White House and bringing them to a club, especially from a president with loose lips who has openly said he would work with foreign nations to hurt a political rival. These are all things on the record. Joining us now, former Secretary of Defense and former Director of the CIA, Leon Panetta. It's very good to have you on the show. Your first question comes from Mike Barnacle. Mike?
Mr. Secretary, last week, a federal judge in Florida ruled that there is going to be perhaps a special master to overlook all of the documents that have been found by the FBI in former President Trump's house at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. My question to you, given the contents that we've been told are part of those documents, who would the special master be? I mean, to be looking at all sorts of highly classified documents, who could do that?
Well, I think that's part of the problem with the decision. I agree with former Attorney General Barr that it's a bad decision and needs to be appealed. And I think the Justice Department will do that, because the reality is, if you are dealing with top secret classifications on documents, I don't know what kind of master you'd have to appoint in order to be able to have somebody who has the clearances necessary to make these decisions. In the end, it is the government's responsibility to look at these documents and to determine how they are to be maintained. And that I think is the issue that is at stake here.
Mr. Secretary, good morning. It's Willie Geist. As someone who was the head of the Defense Department and who ran the CIA and has spent so much of his life protecting the United States of America, what is your reaction, first of all, just to seeing the sheer volume of documents discovered by the FBI at Mar-a-Lago, and then the classification of those documents?
Look, this is a very serious matter, and I think the American people need to understand how serious it is, because it involves our national security. The reason we classify documents is in order to protect our national security and make sure that our adversaries, our enemies, are not going to get access to our most important secrets. And so that's why we provide the classification. That's why we provide the process of protecting those documents. That's why everyone who's involved with secret and top secret documents knows there is a procedure to follow in order to make sure that we don't jeopardize our national security. And to have a situation where these most sensitive documents have been thrown into a box and brought to a country club in Florida, where there's a very good chance our most important secrets could have been compromised as a result of that. I think this is a serious matter, and that ultimately this investigation, as it proceeds, has to determine who's going to be held accountable.
Mr. Secretary, legendary general and, of course, Secretary himself, George Marshall, bragged about the fact that he never voted once in an election in his life, something that didn't make Harry Truman very happy. And he said he bragged that his father had never voted in an election because he was apolitical. He was a soldier. Things have changed dramatically, obviously, since George Marshall's time, Harry Truman's time. And you know it better than anybody. We live in a politically divided country. The recruits that we draw from to serve proudly in the armed forces are on social media that is hyper politicized. And so the challenge is how do we get them to come serve their country proudly and understand that when they put on the uniform, the politics remains outside the door.
Well, Joe, you're right. The lines have blurred, particularly over these last 4 years, with regards to the civilian-military relationship and what is expected of the military and what is expected of those that lead the military. That's why we came together, secretaries and former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to try to establish standards and principles that have always been in place, but that were pretty much rejected over these last 4 years. We've got to get back to the basics. You're in the military. You are committed to defending the country. You're committed to protecting this country. That's your primary role. And you're not entitled to simply engage in politics, political discussion, because that constitutional right, frankly, is not provided to those that defend the country and serve this country. Their primary role is to protect our national security. We've got to get back to that critical standard, because otherwise what you have is a slow deterioration of the discipline that is absolutely critical to having a strong military force.
A little more from the letter, which decries the extremely adverse political climate right now and warns that civilian-military relations are under extreme strain, stating in part, quote, geopolitically, the winding down of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the ramping up of great power conflict mean the U.S. military must simultaneously come to terms with wars that ended without all the goals satisfactorily accomplished, while preparing for more daunting competition with near-peer rivals. Socially, the pandemic and economic dislocations have disrupted societal patterns and put enormous strain on individuals and families. Politically, military professionals confront an extremely adverse environment characterized by the divisiveness of effective polarization that culminated in the first election in over a century, when the peaceful transfer of political power was disrupted and in doubt. Looking ahead, all of these factors could well get worse before they get better. And Mr. Secretary, if you could develop on that point, what are the risks that we're looking at here if something isn't done, and what is it that needs to be done?
Well, it goes to the heart of our concern about the survival of our democracy. January 6th was a wake-up call that our democracy is fragile and that it wouldn't take much to bring down a system of government that we all cherish in this country and we all have a responsibility to protect. So the polarization that we see that is kind of politically dividing the country is being reflected as well in in the military and how the civilian-military relationship has played out. In the last 4 years, President Trump basically used the military as his own security force. He wanted to deploy them to the border. He wanted to deploy them against protesters. He wanted to, he was urged to actually take over the military during the time following the election. All dangerous steps that would undermine the traditional civilian-military relationship that is critical to the operation of our national security. So it's for all of those reasons that we felt it was critical to come together and reestablish the standards, the best practices of how we are to operate in a civilian-military relationship that is the bedrock of our democracy, but that has been blurred and weakened over these last number of years. That is something that is as critical to our national security as maintaining a strong defense force.
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, I want to ask you, because of what you've seen, how long you've served this country, I want to ask you a very general question. You talk about a 30,000-foot question, but I think our viewers need to get your input on this. I want to talk about the state of this country. Day in and day out, we hear about the failings. I've heard about it. I remember my 7th grade teacher telling me the United States was going to go the way of the Roman Empire, but we were in the middle of Vietnam, in the middle of Watergate. And I must say, the assessment from many hasn't gotten better since then. And yet, at least by my vantage point, we're economically the envy of the world, even with our challenges. Militarily, we've got a military that's second to none. Our soft power still far exceeds anybody else's soft power. The totalitarian, our authoritarian countries that we keep hearing are going to overtake us continue to stumble and get in their own way. I'm wondering, in 2022, what is the state of the United States? And it's a big exclusion, other than our calcified political system.
Joe, I think this country in 2022 can go take one of two paths into the future. I honestly believe that America could be an American Renaissance in the 21st century.
Renaissance.
We have a strong economy. We have a creative and innovative economy that is very strong in terms of its particulars. We can provide the training that young people need in order to embrace these new technologies that are coming about. We can actually come together and govern our country. We can exercise leadership in a very difficult world. We could be an American Renaissance, but we could also be an America in decline. If we allow our fears, our hates, our frustrations to divide us and to turn us against one another, I think there's a very good chance we could follow the path of past empires, and we could lose our democracy. What is going to be the key to what path we take? It's the quality of leadership that we elect in this country. If we have leadership that is willing to take the risks associated with leadership, and make no mistake about it, you want to lead in a democracy, you're going to have to take risks. You're going to have to do what's right for the country, not just what's right for your party or for yourself, but for the country. If we have that kind of leadership, I am very confident that we can have an American Renaissance.
Former Secretary of Defense and CIA Director Leon Panetta, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
That is an excellent example.
Good to
And
be with you.
ahead, good to be with you as well. Ahead in our 4th hour, we're going to speak with another former Secretary of Defense. Chuck Hagel will join us. Also ahead, in just over about 90 minutes, Steve Bannon will turn himself in to New York police. We'll go live outside the courthouse for that. And later, an NBC News exclusive interview with reality winner, the ex-NSA translator who was arrested in 2017 for leaking one classified document, her first reaction to the thousands of documents found at Mar-a-Lago. Plus, breaking news this morning, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has arrived in Ukraine. His visit comes as the U.S. ambassador to the UN accuses Russia of war crimes, alleging they are forcibly deporting Ukrainian citizens into Russia. We have the heartbreaking story of one woman searching for her husband after Russian troops forcibly removed him from their home. And up next, a new poll reveals which party voters think was better at handling the COVID pandemic and how that could play into the midterm elections. You're watching Morning Joe. We'll be right back.
Yeah, he made a good example. One or the other.
Look, I know the last few years have been tough, but today, COVID no longer controls our lives. More Americans are working than ever. Businesses are growing, our schools are open. Millions of Americans have been lifted out of poverty. And America is about to take off. I hope you see it as well. Just look around. I believe we could lift America from the depths of COVID. I made a bet on you, the American people, and that bet is paying off, proving that from darkness, the darkness of Charlottesville, of COVID, of gun violence, of insurrection, we can see the light.
That was President Biden 1 week ago in Philadelphia. And joining us now, senior writer for the New York Times, David Leonhardt, who says the handling of the pandemic can be a good issue for Democrats. And Joe, it's interesting because I think it's fair to say that Democrats have a lot to work with in the run up to the midterms. They have a lot of wins on the table that they could talk about. They have the obvious looming criminal.
Let's go forward here. This is more politics than it is really health issues to me. Because, you know, whenever you go putting charts up and who feels this way and who feels that way, it's basically all opinionated.
This summer, I've had more people, more friends, not wearing masks, of course. Most of us aren't wearing masks anymore. Come down with a horrible case of COVID, which hasn't killed anybody, but knocked them down for 2 or 3 weeks. And who knows about the long effect of COVID. But I do wonder when I look at these poll numbers, whether they moved a bit because, well, nobody was paying attention. So many people got COVID this summer, and man, it really knocked a lot of my good friends down.
Yeah, it has, Joe. There's no doubt about it. Some of my friends as well. And as you indicated, I got COVID. There was no problem. I got a kickback on COVID with a slight case of pneumonia, which is a larger problem than COVID, or could be. Not with me, thankfully. But the point is, I think the country is dealing with COVID now as if it's the flu. We have all sorts of medications that we didn't have a couple of years ago. But David, the interest that I have in this story is perpetual, given the fact that it's going to be with us for a long time. But the underpinnings of this story, Joe mentioned it and you just alluded to it as using a few numbers from the poll. And I would submit that maybe it's the most undercovered aspect of COVID by both the print and electronic media not covering it. And by it, I mean the millions of children and the millions of households who have been stripped of 2 years of education, socialization, and it's an incomparable loss, one that is very difficult to measure, but it is out there. You can find it no matter where you are in talking to parents of school-age children. Why? Well, first of all, do you think it is undercovered? And secondly, where do we go from here on that issue?
It is undercovered. It's deeply alarming. It is unequal. The data make clear that the largest learning losses have accrued to lower income kids. They have accrued to Black and Latino kids. There's less data on this, but I'm confident that there have been much larger learning losses among kids with learning disabilities. And so it really is, we overuse this phrase, but it is a national crisis. And like a lot of these slow-moving crises, it's hard to cover because there's not a new piece of news every day. The stimulus, the pandemic rescue bill included a lot of money for catch-up. I'm a little bit skeptical about how well that money's being used, but we'll find out at some point. I think it's important to remember that this generation of kids, this will be a lifelong problem, and this country essentially has a decades-long debt to anyone who's under the age of 20 today, because we disrupted their schooling in a way that none of us experienced. And that really is going to have long-term consequences, and we essentially owe those kids.
Yeah, and Maura, let's go to you now. And as somebody who had COVID early, it had a really consequential impact on you and your life. I'm curious your thoughts about people like me that are saying, well, I don't want to wear masks on planes. I'm tired of wearing masks, which I am. I do get a lecture from Mika, put on a mask.
Yes,
and after
you
the
do.
summer, I just may put on a mask on planes. But we have let our guard down, and a lot of people, again, have gotten sick, and we're still, 1,000 people some days are dying every day from COVID.
Yeah, I think it's an important moment to recognize everybody is weary, but the impact has not been equal across the American population or the world. And so I just want to say, a virus does not a pandemic make. What makes this a pandemic is the fact that 1,000 Americans are still dying from this virus. It is not the flu. And also, many, many more, unfortunately, are coming down with symptoms of long COVID, which has become endemic, and anybody is susceptible to. It's a much larger problem that we're really not addressing with any kind of urgency. So as long as that's the case, as long as we actually don't have the treatment and the medication to truly make this something that is closer to a cold, and we're not there yet, which is what we're not really kind of acknowledging. This is still a serious situation. So I actually understand why it can be freeing to not wear a mask on a plane or a train, on the subway, that's fine. But I think we just need to acknowledge that there are still people in communities for whom this is a everyday fact of life that they have to think about. And masking remains an act of solidarity and respect for vulnerable people. That includes people with disabilities, with chronic conditions like asthma, as well as for hard-hit communities like Native and Black communities, especially Hispanic communities that have been hit especially hard by this virus. So we need more urgency around treatment for long COVID. We need more urgency around respect for vulnerable communities. And it just doesn't cost me that much to put on a mask for someone else.
Absolutely.
Well,
Senior writer, go ahead, Joe.
I think that's such an important point. My parents both died before COVID. They're both very conservative people. They both had a libertarian streak in them. But Willie, I have no doubt that my mom and dad, and I hear their voices. Again, I don't like wearing masks, but if I go into a hardware store, if I go into a convenience store, and there's somebody wearing a mask, I just assume that they're doing it for a reason. Either they're older or they have underlying conditions, and I take the mask out, and as a common act of courtesy, put on that mask. Maura's talking about that. It's not mandated now, but sometimes it just comes down to good manners and common sense.
Common sense, I like that. I usually keep a mask somewhere around me, either in my pack, in my pants, or in my automobile, somewhere within reaching distance. And if I get around a crowd, in which I don't like crowds no more. I don't like to go to concerts. I don't like to go to big banquets. I don't like to go to big events no more. Even the 4th of July firework display, you tend to wonder about getting in a group of people, and the next thing you know, somebody start taking a bunch of pot shots at somebody, some sort of gang rival. and you wind up in the middle of it. I mean, it ain't just the fact that people are leery about COVID, but people are leery about people in general because of our safety concerns. But if I was, let's say, on a bus or in a tight fitting area and I seen a bunch of people sneezing and coughing and hacking and looking like that they was almost at the point of death, heck yeah, I'm gonna put on a mask. I'm gonna use a little common sense and say, well, you know what? This person obviously either is sick or don't feel good or something's going on. And because of it, I don't want a chance towards being around that person while they're sneezing and hacking and coughing and, you know, doing what they're doing. In which, you know, I'm not trying to make fun of people like that because that very well could be me that's coughing and hacking and carrying on. And I just hope, pray to God, that if it was me, that I'd have enough sense to get out of the realm of the public to the point that I wasn't exposing other people to whatever symptoms that I was going through. That's the whole problem right there. Is we don't have respect for people in regards towards other people's feelings, and we've gotten to the point that we just don't care. In other words, if I'm sick, I won't make everybody else sick, or if I'm sick, I don't care if anybody gets sick, and that's not the right opinion to have, especially about something as serious as COVID. It has really upset the apple cart in a lot of people's lives, especially in other foreign countries. It has been devastating to other countries, probably tenfold above and beyond what it's done here in America.
For the person on the other side of that equation. We have let our guard down largely. You go anywhere, you don't really see masks anymore, except for in travel on planes. I got COVID for the first time, I guess 2 months ago or so, and guard totally down. Luckily, I'm boosted, I'm vaxxed, I've got all those things. Thank you, medicine, thank you, science, for that. But it wasn't fun. It was a couple days and then another week of feeling sluggish and tired all the time and all that. So it is still there. The question is, what is that balance of getting on with our lives, as I would argue most people have at this point, as David said, and showing that respect and acknowledging that there still are people out there who are vulnerable, just showing some humanity at the end of the day.
Senior writer for the New York Times, David Lanhard, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning. We appreciate it. And up next, the entire city of Memphis, 650,000 people put on lockdown for hours last night. We'll explain why. Also ahead this morning, an all-time shot in what's being called the best match of this U.S. Open. We'll have more highlights next on Morning Joe. In the longest finishing match in the U.S. Open history, ending this morning at 2:50 Eastern Time.
Wow.
Alcaraz advances to the semifinals after 5 sets spanning 5 hours and 15 minutes. That's long, just 11 minutes shy of another U.S. Open record. Alcaraz will meet Francis Tiafoe tomorrow in the first Grand Slam semifinal for both players. Tiafoe is the first American man to make it to the U.S. Open semis since 2006, following up his victory over 22-time Grand Slam champ Rafael Nadal with a straight set win over number 9 seed Andrei Rublev yesterday. Meanwhile, there will not be an American woman hoisting the trophy at Arthur Ashe Stadium on Saturday. Jessica Pegula falling in straight sets yesterday against top-ranked Iga Swiatek, who advances to face number 6 Aryna Sabalenka in the semifinals. Some incredible tennis, Joe.
Incredible tennis, and what a great Open.
Let's go forward here. Let's go forward here. Looks like we got a commercial here. No commercial. Commercial. I know the Queen don't feel good. She's old. She can't help it. She's lived longer than anybody I've ever known in that parliament.
On and off from various conditions for a couple of years now, and have been out of commission, as it were, not performing her public duties for large chunks of time. So it's not a huge surprise. Also, given her age, she's just accepted, given her hand to the 15th Prime Minister. In her reign. As you know, she became Prime Minister the year Dwight Eisenhower was elected president, when Churchill, still had more than a decade left of his life, and 20 years before Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister, was even born. So this has been an extraordinarily long life, and it would be no surprise, given this Buckingham Palace statement, if we were very close to the end of it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what a tumultuous period she's been through, not only for Britain but for the world. Again, it's hard to even imagine the cataclysmic change over the past 70 years. But you're right, Harry Truman was in office when she became queen in February of 1952, and as you've said, Churchill. Still had quite a few years ahead of him in politics as Britain's prime minister.
Yeah,
what's her legacy?
I mean, her legacy is, I think, to be a symbol of continuity at a time when a nation went from being, a late, still large imperial power to being a post-imperial power, to going into Europe and going out of Europe, having all kinds of social revolutions, going from a mostly white society to a very multicultural, multiracial society, something, by the way, that she was always very encouraging and positive about. Unlike, maybe one or two more distant members of her family, she just managed to absorb all these changes and express how positive they were without sort of changing. So sort of continuity and change has been a theme of the survivability of the British monarchy. If she's about to die, and if Prince Charles is about to become king, I suspect there will be new questions about the survivability of the British monarchy.
And to Ed's point, Joe, the statement, of course, that the medical doctors are concerned for the Queen's health, that being released, being really a sign that something grave is happening, not something that's normal. We're also seeing reporting from ITV that Prince William is traveling to the Queen's Scottish estate as well. So it appears, Joe, the family is gathering.
Yeah. Family is gathering, and it is interesting, the ebb and flow of British power through the years. In 1952, Ed, obviously, the British Empire still in full force. Winston Churchill, of course, said that he wasn't going to be the King's first minister to preside over the collapse of the British Empire. That's exactly what he and what subsequent prime ministers did. But while the Queen was in power, and anybody who watches The Crown and has gotten their history through The Crown has seen one prime minister after another prime minister after another prime minister fail, and Britain seemingly in constant decline. But I want to read this line from a New York Times book review about Great Britain, Ed. Regarding the decline as a world power, everything is relative. 20th century Britain overcame rival empires fought and won 2 cataclysmic wars, and twice reconstructed the world in its own image. The British retreated from empire once its corrupting decadence became.
I think that's her favorite color. I think she looks better originally in that than the dark blues, the light blues, the heavy pinks, the soft greens. I really like that right there. I don't know why, but to me, it just gives that era of originality towards the things that I remembered about both of my grandmothers and people during that era whenever I was just a young lad. To me, she looks more original in that color. That's just my opinion. I mean, somebody else may have a different opinion about her, but to me, that's a good picture of her. She looks very original right there.
Manifest. And since that time, if you want to just compare.
See, she looks kind of, I don't know what the word would be, maybe slumped over, kind of demented right there. I don't know what the age difference is in between the two pictures, but that color does not help. That concept and the color does not help her diminished look right there, because she looks like she's like super tired, and she's like at the point of, I don't know. I just don't know, with a lot of uncertainty in the expression of her face, and the color contrast kind of enhances that right there, which to me isn't the best uh, the best color concept that favors her.
We talked about Winston Churchill.
That's a good color. It's a light blue.
We want to just compare the mocking of Churchill at Yalta,
There's the lively color again.
By FDR and Stalin, as it already was apparent to those two leaders that Britain was going to be a junior partner, that they were in decline, and their continuing decline relative to the Soviet Union, Soviet Russia. And look at the ebb and flow now. Britain, certainly since the late 1980s, once again becoming a world economic power, certainly with few peers other than the United States and China and a handful of other countries. So Britain, in her time, has reasserted at least its economic might.
Yeah, I mean, it remains a very powerful scientific power. There's a lot of innovation from Britain. It's not, if you look over history at the decline of empires, generally they end, and then the imperial sort of core collapses. So this with Britain, with France, with other European powers, has been an unusual story, because I guess Britons are now about 4 or 5 times better off than they were when Queen Elizabeth took the throne. People continue to get wealthier. There's a question mark over that right now, and for the next year or so, with the energy crisis and the impact of Brexit. But it is a country that has gone from being ancient to being postmodern without any revolutions. And I think, there are huge social problems in Britain. Let's not underestimate them. But they're not problems that a slightly less wild politics than Britain has seen over the last 3 or 4 years can't address. Britain can address them. And I think Queen Elizabeth is popular with small r Republicans, people who wouldn't normally be monarchists or royalists, genuinely respect her, because she's embraced these changes. She's embraced multiculturalism, multi-faith, or people of no faith. She was a wonderful public figure during the pandemic. Her address to the nation, evoking "We'll meet again" during lockdown, evoking the White Cliffs of Dover, a song of the Second World War. She's just had a knack for embodying the best of Britain. And there's a lot of bad things about Britain, don't get me wrong, but she represents, I think, the best of it.
And Ed, we got a chance back in June, just 3 months ago, around the Jubilee, marking 70 years on the throne for Queen Elizabeth, to sort of review and reflect about her career and her life and her time on the throne. And so it's fresh in our minds. And if you think, Ed, really just again about the scope of her life, you know, having taken, as you said, the throne when Winston Churchill was the prime minister, a man who was born in 1874. And now giving her hand just a few days ago to the 15th prime minister under her watch in Liz Truss. My God, she's seen so much in her life.
Absolutely. She come up through the rankings of after World War II and the Cold War era and what's going on right now in today with all the superpowers responding and reacting the way that they have. She has seen a tremendous amount of water go under the bridge, as my grandfather used to say. Best of luck to the family and best of luck to her.
She has, I mean, the picture.
I'm going to go forward here. Seems like they're kind of repeating themselves there. Part of life. Death is part of life. She don't have no complaints, that's for sure. I wish that I could live that long and stay as gracious as she's been.
Admiration for her longevity.
Okay, let's go. We're probably going to go to a commercial here. Looks like it. They're dedicating this whole segment here to her. Wait a minute.
To her bedside at her summer estate in.
Yep, they're dedicating this whole slot here for her.
Welker has details.
This morning, all eyes are on the Justice Department as it weighs whether to appeal that ruling by a Trump-appointed judge in Florida.
Okay, we've done heard this. I want to get to the part about Memphis. I haven't heard nothing about Memphis last night. We already know all about this. We're moving on, moving on, moving on, moving on, moving on.
Charged with a crime and has denied any wrongdoing, now telling The View Mr. Trump's handling of classified material should, quote, concern every American.
I don't understand how these documents ended up where they are. I don't understand how he was permitted to take them even to the residence, let alone to a country club in Florida.
Yeah, and again, the Trump administration, as Willie said last hour, investigated Hillary Clinton and concluded she didn't intentionally do anything wrong in what she did. I do find it, Ed Luce, absolutely fascinating that Marco Rubio can keep a straight face. I mean, it's a skill, I guess, to keep a straight face, bitching and whining about FBI leaks and how horrific FBI leaks are, when he and the Republicans wallowed in the FBI's leaks from the New York office for a year and a half on Hillary Clinton, on everything from the Clinton Foundation to the email server to you name it. The FBI was leaking nonstop. All right, so there's gambling going on in the premises. This has happened for 50, 60 years. Let's not be shocked about it. But again, what concerns us here, and I'm curious your thoughts, what concerns us here is Marco Rubio is the top ranking Republican on the Intel Committee, the committee that is supposed to closely guard these secrets and have oversight to make sure these secrets are guarded. And he's right now basically telling America he just doesn't give a damn.
Wow. Wow.
He knows, we know that he knows that what he's saying is cant. It's the words of a charlatan. These are
Exactly.
completely misleading, completely dishonest, mendacious comparisons he's making.
A charlatan is a good expression.
The history of the Hillary Clinton emails, which must rank as one of the biggest unforced errors by any police agency, any investigative agency, by the FBI, was something that arguably turned the 2016 election. And it turned out there were no classified emails in Hillary's so-called homebrew server, that this was an innocent and completely trivial breach of regulations that she'd made, completely trivial. And if it had been anybody else, it wouldn't have been an issue. Marco Rubio was talking about it as if this was a threat to U.S. national security, but apparently taking documents, top classified documents, to your private residence, telling the FBI they're not there, telling the DOJ they're not there, that's just a storage question. I mean, it is breathtaking, and we run out of adjectives. I suspect because Rubio is in a tighter re-election battle with Val Demings in Florida than he might have been expecting, is wanting to be more Trumpian than normal and more MAGA than normal to whip up money and attention, because the self-abasement is just so hard to explain and understand otherwise.
He's a showboater. And just like a lot of those politicians, they'll move to the far right just as quick as they'll move to the far left. And it's all based around their own personal perspective and their own personal persona of where they want to be and how they want to get there. They're not up there for the will of the people. The majority of them, they're up there for showboating, seeing what they can get out of it. More camera time, more contributions, more of this, more of that.
So Ed,
And that's not what our government was originally supposed to be set up on.
as you've probably already figured
It's
out,
very troubling. Very troubling whenever you see these things and you bring them out to these people's attention, and they're still in denial about the things, even though they get caught basically with a smoking gun. It's very troubling. We're living in troubling political times right now here in America that that can be consequential to a great deal of people's lives.
It's 25 past the hour, a worsening situation at the nuclear plant in Ukraine. The country's deputy prime minister warning residents to evacuate or take cover.
Oh, God.
That as U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken made a surprise visit to the country. NBC News correspondent Megan Fitzgerald has more from Ukraine.
This morning, a surprise visit to Ukraine from American Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. The secretary is on the ground in the war-torn country, meeting with government officials and visiting a children's hospital. It comes at a time when Ukraine has been sounding an international alarm about the quickly deteriorating Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, the town around the facility under intense fire again. Ukraine's deputy prime minister telling residents in Russian-occupied territory near the plant to evacuate or take cover. Meanwhile, the plant clinging to power, relying on the only working reactor. World leaders fearing a possible catastrophe as both sides blame the other for the continued shelling.
Russia is playing roulette with nuclear safety.
Residents aren't taking any chances in preparing for a possible radiation leak. This pharmacist says people are coming in droves asking for potassium iodide pills, but she says they've run out. This as Ukraine's top military chief claims in an interview with a state-run media outlet that Russia could use tactical nuclear weapons, putting the world on guard for what he says is the potential for a nuclear conflict. This morning, the devastation in Ukrainian towns in the east are mounting. First responders rushing to get civilians trapped under the rubble after fresh Russian attacks in the Donetsk region destroyed a hospital, civilian buildings, and set cars on fire. The attacks keep coming. But Ukraine is fighting back. In his overnight address to the country, President Zelensky congratulating troops for reclaiming territory in Kharkiv as soldiers reclaim villages from the east to the south. This footage showing Ukrainian troops lowering a Soviet-era flag in a town near Kharkiv. But President Putin remains defiant. The Russian leader saying his country has only gained from the conflict and mocking the West for Russian oil sanctions Putin says aren't working. As Russia seems to be tightening ties with Asia, planning to meet in a face-to-face meeting with China's President Xi next week.
NBC's Megan Fitzgerald with that report. And still ahead, former Obama campaign manager David Plouffe joins the conversation. We're going to get his view on the upcoming midterms just ahead. Also, the breaking news we're following this morning, Queen Elizabeth II appears to be gravely ill. Her doctors say she is under medical supervision. Her family is rushing to be by her side. The BBC's Katty Kay will join us on the news.
Her family, some of the family is already in Scotland at Balmoral Castle with her, others making their way, and we will be on top of that story for the rest of the morning. Also coming up, a live report from a New York courthouse where Steve Bannon is facing a new criminal indictment. He's expected to surrender to state prosecutors at any moment. We will discuss the case against him and follow the breaking news about the health of Queen Elizabeth when Morning Joe comes.
Down for hours.
Yesterday, NBC's Jesse Kirsch has details.
Overnight, a deadly attack on Memphis and a gunman now charged, leaving the terrified city on lockdown for hours. Police say the lone gunman live streaming parts of his shooting spree that stretched into the night, leaving at least 4 people dead and 3 more injured.
This is no way for us to live, and it is not acceptable.
Police say 19-year-old Ezekiel Kelly's rampage began in the early morning, the violence later continuing for nearly 5 hours across 8 different crime scenes, including this auto zone. Authorities warning the public to stay inside as they closed in on their suspect. Public transportation, including buses and trolley service, were also suspended. A minor league baseball game downtown called off. The ballpark locked down for hours. NBC affiliate WMC's Joyce Peterson showing emotion that so many in Memphis were feeling.
Memphis is tired right now.
Eventually, police were finally able to corner and capture the suspect after he allegedly crashed a stolen car during a high-speed pursuit. Now, Kelly's behind bars, where the mayor says he should have been sooner. Court records show that a warrant for first-degree murder was issued Wednesday for Kelly. The reason for that warrant is unknown. He was also charged in 2020 with 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder when aged 17, and subsequently pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of aggravated assault.
If Mr. Kelly served his full 3-year sentence, he would still be in prison today, and 4 of our fellow citizens would still be alive.
The mayor said he served 11 months in prison and was released in March of this year. More violence in a city still reeling from the abduction and killing of mother and teacher Eliza Fletcher. Court documents revealed that suspect had a lengthy criminal record. He was released from prison in 2020. Memphis's mayor speaking out overnight to a suffering city.
This has been a painful week in our city, but I have hope for Memphis.
Memphis in a lot of pain right now. NBC's Jesse Kirsch reporting for us there. Coming up next, we will have the very latest on the breaking news about the health of Queen Elizabeth as Buckingham Palace expresses concerns for her health, and her family makes its way to Scotland to be with her. We'll bring you the very latest details there. Also ahead this morning, former Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel will join us. He was one of the former military officials who signed a letter warning that divisive partisan politics is making our country less safe. We'll speak to him. Also ahead, we will speak with the parents of Seth Rich. He is the 27-year-old DNC staffer shot and killed in 2016. A new book reveals startling new details about the conspiracy theories pushed by some on the far right about their son's death that caused the family great pain. Morning Joe's coming right back.
I want to go back here to Memphis real quick before I end this program.
Citizens would still be alive.
The mayor said he served 11 months in prison and was released in March of this year. More violence in a city still reeling from the abduction and killing of mother and teacher.
Whenever I was in transit towards leaving the Hopkinsville, Kentucky area, going up to LaGrange, Kentucky, and then coming back to the Hopkinsville, Kentucky area jail just to be able to get an evaluation done. I remember I was in a jail, and I can't remember for sure where it was at, but it was somewhere around the Louisville, Kentucky area. And what I took notice in, more so than anything, is that the gangsters really, really watched the local Louisville, Lexington, Kentucky area news. And whenever they seen somebody that had gotten away with something, or with somebody that had ambushed somebody, or somebody robbed or raped or murdered somebody, by and large, the locals in that area would celebrate. It was as if they was all gang-related members to being a lawlessness society, to the degree that whenever the carelessness of the police would subject somebody either getting off early or getting loosed or any of the above, man, they would go to a whole new level of celebration, of roar. And it was the only event that I can remember to where God intervened in my life within a matter of just seconds, to where I had realized that somebody had compromised on my my account that is considered your commissary account, that somebody had compromised that because of my lack of I guess you'd call it experience being in a jail like that. And I had requested one of the CEOs, correction officers, to come, and that I was going to make a complaint that they had a certain particular procedure to go through. And I remember as I was walking out of a pod with probably 35 or 40 men in it, there may have been, I don't know, 6 or 8 whites, and the rest of them was basically blacks, maybe a couple Mexicans, maybe a couple of this, couple of that in there. But I remember walking out of that pod, and as soon as that door shut, and I ain't talking about halfway soon, I'm talking about as soon as the door shut in behind me, total freaking chaos set in, to the degree that it just turned into a wild spree of a knockdown drag out, that then, as they was shuffling me around to secure where I was supposed to have been, there was another 7 or 8 cops that was on their way to go in and break it up. Well, in the meantime, while going in and breaking it up, there was a lot of people that probably wound up with shattered teeth, probably wound up with all kinds of bad bruises and etc. on their face and on their body, because it was literally a jail riot as soon as I walked out of that cell. I don't know what prompted it. I think it was another white guy that was speaking in my behalf pertaining to me walking out and making this complaint. And I was supposed to, after making the complaint, come back to that same pod. But after that occurred, they was sure not going to let me come back into that particular pod, because it was about halfway related towards what was going on in my life, and towards a bunch of white guys that was willing to defend me because of my account being compromised. There wasn't no way that they was going to let me back into that particular pod. So they sent me on another goose egg hunt, going somewhere else and putting me in a completely different pod. And of course, usually what goes on in one wing in one pod does not never truly get out to the other pods, other than he said, she said scenarios that usually takes either hours or days before it goes down through the line. That's the way that the wardens want it. They don't want one pod knowing what the other pod is thinking. They keep a very close security measure in those areas. I mean, if they're getting ready to transport you somewhere, they don't come and let you know a day ahead of time or even an hour ahead of time that you're fixing to be transported, because they don't want you getting on the telephone and calling up your buddies and telling your buddies, oh, they're fixing to transport me. I want y'all to be out here towards getting ready to initiate this problem. And I guess the reason why that I know that so well, being caught up into the system, is that whenever they would transport prisoners in an airplane, especially, usually by buses, Greyhound buses or whatever, or similar towards Greyhound buses, whenever you got to the terminal, there would be extra security around that airport. And whenever you basically got out of that bus to go into that airport, there was an exchange somewhere between 30 and possibly even 70 or 100 SWAT officers sitting outside with loaded artillery, that if one person so much as blinked or done something wrong, they would initiated force upon that situation as they deemed appropriate. So whenever you're around all these freaking people with all these guns, and you're around in an environment to where I could have very well got my head bashed in if I didn't get out of that pod to be able to make my complaint over my account being compromised. Whenever you're in an environment like that, you could actually go in with a simple charge, and while you're in there, get another charge or even a worser charge, to the point that it just turns into a relentless cycle, to the point that you could have went in there and possibly been out in 1129, but the next thing you know, because you have created all these other charges, now you're looking at possibly a lifetime sentence, and you won't never get out. So anytime that they put you in an environment like that, it's only by the hand and the will of God that took care of me towards not allowing for something like that to progressively materialize to the point of me either becoming bodily harmed, killed, or having a charge placed on my life to the point of me never getting out of that facility. In addition to, you got people in there that will lie, steal, do anything in the world against you, and if they don't like you for whatever reason, I mean, it may not be a political reason, it may not be a gang related reason, it may not be a monetary reason, it may just be somebody don't like you, and because of it, they're going to set you up towards putting things underneath your bed mat that's not supposed to be there, either in drug activity or possibly a shank, like a knife or something that can be used as a weapon. And the next thing you know, you wind up with another big charge. So anytime you go to jail, you are in a very, very vulnerable position towards anything and everything happening to you. I did go through the circuit down through Memphis, Tennessee, and Shelby County whenever I was going through some of my processes. And Shelby County jails was probably some of the worst, other than Louisville, Kentucky. Louisville, Kentucky was bad. Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, their county facilities was bad. Chicago was bad. Other areas that I've been to, including Atlanta, going through various transits. This happened in 1991 with Homeland Security. Going into Atlanta jail is almost like going into a complete whole different city or country. I have never seen so many buildings. I have never seen so much barbed wire. I have never seen so many either blacks or Mexicans in my entire life. A matter of fact, probably 90% of the time, I had no earthly idea towards what people was saying or what the content of their conversation was about because of so many different languages. Whenever you drive up into that particular facility outside of Atlanta, Georgia, you immediately start seeing live guards on each corner, on each post, that's got live artillery guns that can shoot at will. Like I said, you're just walking into a complete, total different environment. It's the same way in some of the jails down in Louisiana. It's the same way with the jails in Cook County, Illinois, Chicago, Illinois. It's the same way in some of the prison systems up towards New York. That whenever you walk in there, the odds of you walking out and not either getting beat up, raped, or having to defend yourself or getting another charge put on your life is almost slim to none. These jails, as far as I am concerned, has taken the place of mental institutions. As a matter of fact, I have been in mental institutions before, either in Bolivar, Tennessee, Clarksville, Tennessee, Washington, D.C., I guess you would call MCC in downtown Chicago a mental installation facility. But I have been in mental installation facilities that handled themselves probably 10 times better than a lot of these jail administrations does, because at least they control the people either by a strong arm effect in these mental institutions, or they control them with seducing them with drugs. Either or, they demand a peaceful, um, fitting environment in these areas. And as soon as somebody becomes abrupt, it I personally have never seen a riot in a mental facility or anything even associated to a mental facility, because the inmates, I mean, not the inmates, but the guards and the nurses, the staff in general, will not tolerate anything reaching that level, to where whenever you go to jails, regardless whether it's state jails, county jails, or federal jails, you're liable to be engaged in an actual riot, and you was just only in there for a misdemeanor. And the next thing you know, you wound up either bodily harmed, or you wind up with another charge, to the degree that you wind up having to spend that much more time in jail, or they throw you in a hole where it's considered solitary, and you basically don't get around nobody, you don't talk to nobody other than the people that's coming to your door. You don't get no TV. In some cases, you won't even get commissary. I don't care if you had $500 on the book. In some cases, whenever you immediately go into some jails, it depends on what the jail is and what the circumstances are. But in some jails, whenever they throw you in confinement, you have just basically torn away any and all rights that you may have had that now you no longer have, and basically you're just standing in a 10 by 10 cell with a cot, if you want to call it a cot. It's a piece of steel with a very, very thin mat on it that is very, very uncomfortable to sleep on. And you got a toilet, and you got a slot in the door where they bring in your food in the morning, noon, and night. And in some cases, whenever you are in places like that, pertaining to you being in consolidated confinement, uh, you're not allowed basically to leave that cell, and they'll actually bring a portable shower to your door after they restrain you again, put handcuffs on your back, put handcuffs in behind your back, open the door, push this cage type thing against your door, then they unlock you again, and then you take a bar of soap and you take a halfway shower, uh, with usually no hot water and bad water pressure. And then after you get through, you go back in your cell, they lock you back up, they tie you back down, and then they pull the door open again, they shut the door, then you take the handcuffs off, and then you go on about your business. But I'm just saying, any and all of that environment is not a pleasant experience at all. And to be quite honest with you, what's leading me to this particular conversation with this shooting spree and all the other things going on down in Memphis right now, I'm going to go as far to say that over in Shelby County, Lauderdale County, and all those other surrounding counties has not yet seen nothing. Because these criminals that know they are criminals, and they don't mind telling you that they're a criminal, they stick together, they bond together, even though they don't know one another, but because one criminal backs the other criminal, they actually applaud criminal activity while at the same time degrading the police as far as the civilized society. This is where we are, and this is the exchange of things that we're falling into. And I feel so sorry for this young girl right here. She was, I think, a kindergarten teacher. She had 2 children. The people around her loved her because she radiated so much joy and so much hope and so much light. And to think that some monster, some cruel, cold-hearted, mean, evil, demonic monster would have done something like this just for the thrill of it just absolutely makes me curl my toenails, to think that these people think that they are going to be able to do stuff like this and not get heavily punished pertaining to our judicial system, either in the state of Tennessee or our federal judicial system here in America. It's just absolutely sickening. Like I said, it makes my toenails curl up just to think about this type of activity that is now progressively getting worse. I mean, the FBI knows it. Even our president, Mr. Biden, spoke about it pertaining to all the violent talk on the internet. And before it's over with, I hate to say this, and I'm not supporting this, but before it's over with, it could actually get so bad in America to where the government pulls the plug on social media acceptance to the point that they order for all these social media platforms, YouTube, Facebook, whoever that's out there that's got these social media platforms that can communicate with one to another, may actually have to take all that stuff down. May have to stop it, sensitize it, especially if that is the way that these criminals are communicating with one another and building up their ranks and their alliances. And before it's over with, it could get so far out of hand to where the government intervenes and orders for social media to come to a stop. And don't think for a second that they ain't got the power to do that. If they got the power to bring in tanks, federal military officers on the streets with artillery and tanks, don't you think that they got the authority that they can tell Zuckerberg or whatever his name is on Facebook and tell everybody else on those social media platforms to shut her down? That's the direction that we're heading in. I don't know if you realize that or not, but that's the direction that America is heading in, just to be able to maintain any type of law and order, especially whenever it comes to federal law and order. It's out of control. It's a runaway train. It's snowballing. And like I said a while ago, I'm just afraid that the worst, as the old saying goes, the best is yet to come, which means the worst is yet to come, may actually be just around the corner, coming near a neighborhood near you, just like the Walmart slogan. No, I'm not predicting this, but what I am doing is that I am looking at the facts towards how the things is evolving here in America, especially in various cities. And I'm listening to various things on the news pertaining to federal and state uh, situations that are becoming more and more dire. And of course, whenever you're looking at bigger areas like New York, LA, Atlanta, Shelby County, Cook County, and Chicago, whenever you get to looking at some of these cities, even though it's run on a county level, it actually is projected as a state or federal event due to the fact of so many people that lives within those territories.
That it must be almost impossible for you to comprehend as a dad that you're not even allowed to mourn your son's death in peace.
We've been able to talk with TJ, and there is a commonality that we've had with the way these stories with no truth, no facts, just come back to haunt you. And hopefully the major stuff about Seth, all the lies.
It's tormentive. These people are being tormented. Just like a group of strangers that would tie somebody up and basically torment their lives, even though you may not be actually tied up, because of the surrounding circumstances in these people's lives. They're tormented. I was tormented. Grieving about my brother. I think it was either the 10th or the 11th day still in a grieving mode, still in a very confused state towards how am I going to handle this. My brother David didn't have no executives. He didn't have no power of attorneys. He didn't have no will. He didn't have nothing. Okay. And the only way that I could even think about gaining into his bank account or conduct any business legally, I had to immediately shell out a pretty abundant amount of money just to become a legal executor over his estate. And in doing so, and in all these different processes that I was going through, I get arrested. I get arrested because the attorney that my brother and I had hired, Bruce Brown out of Union City, did not let me know when the court date was coming up. And because I wasn't there for the court date, the courts turned it all around, even though it was my brother and I that wanted this court date. We wanted to go to a higher court. And then backfired on me by coming out here and arresting me with a stalking charge. And the only reason why that they hit me with a stalking charge is because that they felt like the stalking charge was going to be able to be combined with another charge up in Kentucky, even though it had been redacted. Okay. But they felt like because I was a habitual offender, now they could go after me in a federal proceedings towards actually putting a felony onto my life. So in the state of me grieving, basically my whole world collapsed right in front of me. And of course it was then, in my brother's death in 2017, after me trying to hang myself in jail with a sheet, because at that point in time, I felt like that I was being driven off into this state. I mean, I didn't even have the right to grieve my own brother's death in a dignity type form until I had gotten arrested and all these fake phony charges placed up into my life, and plus the event that happened up in Kentucky with 2 telephone calls, spending almost a year in jail over that, and then the event happened out there in Oklahoma towards planting a bomb in the back of my truck. It was just too much. It was too much, and I wound up in Bolivar, and that's whenever I got an opportunity of meeting Buford Pulser's distant niece, talking to her about her problems and what was going on in her life and the family's life. And that's whenever they discovered that I was a diabetic. Up until then, I didn't know that I was a diabetic. I had no idea that I was a diabetic. But because of the medication that they'd give me up in Kentucky, in those chain of events that happened towards Risperdal, it made me swell up, and it basically turned me into a diabetic. It literally turned me into a diabetic because I went from 240 to 340 pounds in less than a 6-week period. Keep in mind, whenever you're in jail, they basically feed you potatoes in the morning, potatoes in the evening, potatoes at night. You eat all this starch. Starch is what basically makes people gain weight. You don't have near the exercise program while you're in jail. You're not getting proper exercise. You want to sleep a lot. And it just adds insult to misery towards what was going on in my life after they arrested me over my attorney not letting me know whenever my trial date was going to come up. And even after bringing this to Judge Pence's attention, after all that it was all said and done with, he said, "It looks to me like you had an attorney problem." Well, it was the very attorney that told Judge Pence and Johnson in court up here in Weakley County in the jail court that the county court, that Mr. Jackson was not given ample opportunity of coming to court because he didn't know when the court date was because Bruce Brown, my attorney, said that I failed to call him and let him know. Did that make any difference with the judicial system in Weakley County? Hell no. They thought that they was going to be looked upon as being heroes because they had arrested the so-called zero. And the people that was the zeros was the people that was acting unprofessional. Because once you get your charge acquitted and it's down to something else, they can no longer hold you in content of being a habitual offender. That is now out of the question. Though they had an opinion about the charge, though you may have gotten charged with the charge, that charge is basically somebody accusing you. Now, if you can get your attorney, at the time it was appointed to me up in Trigg County, Kentucky, if you can get your attorney to work out some sort of prenuptial deal, that would be more favorable in and on your behalf, because it wouldn't have such of a tendency of haunting you on down the road. And you would have thought that whenever I finally got attorney Jay Silvernail to fight in my defense and get the charges thrown plumb out of court in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, you would think that it would be mandated by the courts of forcing the media of going in and restructuring that in which what they had said about you and putting it in the right format, rather than continue to keep it on their social media platform that just adds that much more insult to injury pertaining to character assassination. And that's exactly what the local media in Oklahoma and the surrounding Oklahoma areas is guilty of. They knowed that those charges was thrown out. They know that I did not threaten Lieutenant Burns, that was a United States seasoned marshal at the time. They know that I didn't threaten that individual, but yet and all, they still have yet to go in and redact it out of their original manuscript. And as far as I'm concerned, that right there is it should be a total violation, and that right there proves that various people that I have come across and throughout my life, that their sole holy, if you want to call it holy, their holy solely motives was to bring destruction into the founder of the Windmill Ministries' lives.
Will disappear, but his name will still be tied to conspiracies for a long, long time.
We'll always have to live with them. Yeah. So why don't you tell us something about Seth? It struck me that in Lori's case, here was a young woman who was working at a bank and decided she wanted to get engaged in public service. She wanted to make a difference. And for that, her family is still paying the price because she just wanted to participate in public service. You could say the same thing about Seth, a very ideologically young man. Tell us about Seth.
When Seth was just in high school, he was working on the Ben Nelson's Senate campaign when he was just a junior in high school. But he had liked politics. He watched CNN, or not CNN, C-SPAN for fun, and he knew all the senators, all the congressmen. Later on, he would be able to tell you which district everyone was in. That it was just something that he loved being part of. He studied political science at Creighton University, and then as soon as he got out of
and there's lots of people that's a political advocate that is inspired by how that our system is run and who's involved in it and what's going on. It doesn't make him a bad guy. It just makes him interested towards being an advocate. There's nothing wrong with that.
He moved to Washington, D.C., and worked first for a polling company, and then got like a dream job of working for the DNC, where he was able to be part of it and part of helping to make sure that everyone could vote. Voting was extremely important to him.
Making a difference in the world to help people was his number one thing, no matter where he was at.
Right.
When he was in high school,
right,
he jumped in on things to help people.
Right.
And he wanted to...
Basically a community organizer, somebody that wanted to better society and not worsen it.
Wanted to make sure everybody, didn't matter what your color was, everybody got help and he could make a difference to help those people.
Treated fairly.
And I've often said to whoever murdered our son, you murdered the wrong person, because you obviously have a problem and he's the one that could have and would have solved it.
No, ma'am, I don't mean to contradict you over your son, but in reality, the devil and the devil's people did take out the right person, because obviously your son was not of a evil origin. He was a good person that wanted to help society rather than tear down society, and because of it, he was targeted. So yeah, I understand your sympathies towards these matters, because it was your son, but at the same time, you got to realize that we are at a war. We are in a position of spiritual warfare right now, here not only in America but throughout the world. And if the devil and the devil's people can bring ruin into somebody's life, they're going to do it. That's their job, is to bring destruction into people's lives. They're out to kill, steal, and destroy, according to the Bible. They're the author of confusion. They don't like Christians. They don't want Christians to live. They want them to be taken out before their time, even though the Heavenly Father says to let the wheat grow with the tares. I knew exactly what was motivating these people, and my brother David Jeffrey Jackson did too. Knew exactly why these people was responding and reacting the way that they was acting, either coming to 430 Beech Grove Road or 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. We knew exactly why the court system would not fight on our behalf towards stopping the aggravation that we was going through and being harassed and stalked and hunted and all the above right here in this area. We knew exactly why. We're not stupid. We may be a little slow whenever it comes to reading and writing and their messed up English language over here in America, but I guarantee you we are not blinded of the facts towards why the Christian society, the good people, are being targeted. It's called anti-Semitism. And though it may not be in a direct way pertaining to people's belief in being a born-again Christian, it can be in an indirect way towards still being harassed, attacked, or being treated in a negligent way by our judicial system pertaining to our courts.
After he died, what we did...
Go ahead, Joel.
After he died and all these stories came out, we kept our one mission was to just follow the truth, whatever the truth is, or what we're going to believe in, and is what really happened.
Yeah, I was just going to say, everyone I've talked to in the last few years have said nothing but good things about Seth, that he was bright and charismatic and just such an impressive young man. Mary, if you can speak to it, just that you sort of referenced it a little bit earlier, that you're still sort of tortured by this conspiracy theory to this day. I think about even the Sandy Hook families, because of some conspiracy theorists making up lies about them, that they've had to suffer even further, that they've had to move and they've had to go into hiding and all these things. What has it been like for you as you try to mourn the death of your wonderful son, to have this additional pain brought upon you?
Well,
Horrifying.
There's no mourning like mourning. There's scared to death. I watch out the window all the time. I watch our monitors 360 all the time. I watch around me and my family all the time.
I don't.
And if
I don't. I'm going to tell you why. Because if they was to sneak back up here and kill me, to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, and it would be probably one of the best things that could ever happen to me, because it would take me out of this torturous situation that reluctantly I brought myself into whenever I moved back to Northwest Tennessee. And it would be actually a blessing or a privilege to be taken out, rather than to put up with this slow, agonizing, torturous, every day to day rejection, or even stereotype type people that obviously knows that they have made a great era here in the state of Tennessee, with and when Kentucky and Oklahoma and Washington D.C., but none of them is willing to come clean towards trying to work it out or straighten it out. So as I do so, towards me being hunkered down here, it don't frighten me a bit. I'm not going to lose not one wink sleep over their terrorism tactics, and I'm going to tell you why. If you read the Bible, I think it's somewhere over in Ezekiel, it's in the New Testament, or Philippians, or Thessalonians, or somewhere, it says for us as Christians, do not render fear into their torment. That's why I don't lay awake at night, and I don't sleep with one eye open, one eye shut, and I don't have all these security devices. I do have security cameras. If somebody was bold enough to want to come out here and accommodate that situation, that way maybe my story would be told, because I don't want to die. Okay, I want you to hear me out. I don't directly want to die, and I'm not going to take my life like that they would want me to do, because they actually want me to live. They actually want me to be tormented in this torment that they have created. It would actually be a privilege that I wouldn't have had to have gone through any of this sorrow beginning in 1983 over in Kenton, Tennessee. But because they're demonic, because they're wicked, because they have all these pride issues, because they're not true at heart to begin with, because they really don't give a damn about the citizens that has put them in power in these positions, because they're very biased, and because they have made a great era, not only in my particular life pertaining to me being the founder of the Windmill Ministries Missions Ministry, but also how that they have been a failure with global warming, and how that they have failed the American people towards not being able to provide safety and security for the American people. They know they have failed, but yet now the people continue, the wicked, demonic people. Once more, birds of a feather flock together. Jesus said that sinners love sinners, but what thank do they have? They keep electing these bad officials into their system because they're bad people. Because they're bad people. And until they get enough of this inflicting bitterness that they have created not only for others but for themselves. Until they get enough of this, they'll be just exactly like they are in the regards towards this standoff. And, you know, as I'm getting older, I'm getting wiser. I'm documenting these things on my particular YouTube or Facebook platform. And every day, I'm personally, myself, am leaving a footprint. And I ain't talking about necessarily a carbon footprint, but I'm leaving a footprint of my existences here on the planet in the year 2022. That way, if possibly one of them does become so bold or so lucky that they can actually take me out, at least maybe there's enough information out there about my story that it can be rewritten and told to not only the American people but the world in the proper format that it needs to be told in. And I guess if I had any recommendations about these people here that's going through what they're going through pertaining to their son, basically the rich family, is that they need to do the exact same thing. To bring liberation into their son's life, what they need to do is sit down and dialogue his life, put it on paper or put it on tape or put it on social media platform. And I guess that's, you know, partly what they're doing today towards going before MSNBC and basically try to clean up the works that the demonic Luciferian Lucifers has brought up into this family. Because whenever you attack a person, you're just not attacking that person. You're attacking everything that's associated and connected to that person, including the people on the left hand of your screen pertaining to their parents. You keep in mind he had cousins, he had nieces, he had probably uncles and aunts. He was associated with his life with a certain amount of people that surrounded his life. So whenever you affect somebody like that, you're not just affecting their life, you're affecting the whole surrounding of his atmosphere life.
Anybody is coming at me at the wrong angle, has stood there too long. I watch their eyes, I watch every movement because the torture is still there, and those people that wanted to become famous off my lies of my son, that still hasn't gone away.
And I'm like her. I'm more vigilant now. I watch where I park my vehicle. I watch who's going up and down my road. I listen to different things that's being chatted on pertaining to social media platform. I'm like them in a sense. I'm not over paranoid about it, but I do want to keep both my radar screens going. That way, if somebody does decide that they want to become this anti-resistant Juby movement, that maybe at least there'll be some sort of vindication pertaining to my death if they decide that that's the route that they want to go. That's the only advice that I can tell these parents, is that if you want to vindicate your son's death, sit down and do a biography of him and put it out there to the public towards just exactly what type of person that he was before his death. And I would say that to anybody that knows that their loved one either got taken or put in jail or was treated illegitimately. I would say that to any family member.
And I'm waiting for the hell to hit every day.
It is 1 minute past the top of the hour, and we are speaking with Joel and Mary Rich, the parents of Seth Rich, about the impact conspiracy theories have, especially on them, in light of how their son's murder was covered and the narrative created around it. We're going to continue the conversation. Just let you know, we're also following breaking news about Queen Elizabeth II. Apparently, gravely ill, and Steve Bannon due in court in the next half hour or so. We'll be covering that live as well. But we continue now with Joel and Mary Rich, and Mike Barnacle has the next question.
Mrs. Rich, you've lived a double nightmare, you and your husband, for all these years. The nightmare of losing your son, the nightmare of being surrounded by conspiracy theorists and having your lives put in peril because of their conspiracies, including that of Steve Bannon, who is being indicted today in New York City. But my question to you is, today, no one has yet been arrested for the murder of your son.
Wow.
Today, there is a retired District of Columbia police officer who played a part in developing his conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
And do you follow an open murder case is an open murder case? It remains open until there is a solution, until someone has been caught and arrested for it. Do you follow up with the DC Police Department at all on this?
Oh, yes. I made a promise to my son. I laid my hand on the casket and I promised him I will find his murderers before I die. And he's keeping me to that. But we talked with I want to call his name, but I'm not going to. We speak often. We want to make sure the tasks are being done and handled. And in fact, I was just getting ready to call him again. We're not going to let up on finding our son's murderers.
Justice.
And in fact, people don't understand that the day this opened up, the day all this happened, was the day it made it almost impossible to try to find my son's murderers. So this 6 years has just screwed up everything for trying to find the main course, which is my son's murderers.
Joel and Mary Rich, we see how so very proud you are of your son Seth, who was living his dream of service and wanted to help people. And that is what people should know about him. Thank you so much for joining us and talking about the unbelievably horrific, torturous impact of conspiracy theories promulgated by certain outlets that will not be mentioned right now. Investigative reporter for ProPublica, Andy Kroll. Thank you as well. The new book is entitled A Death on W Street, The Murder of Seth Rich and the Age of Conspiracy. Thank you all very much for being on this morning. We turn now to the breaking news from the UK, where Buckingham Palace.
Obviously, that's a very, very intense situation that's going on there with the Queen. Our prayers go to the family. Our prayers go out to the surrounding circumstances in her life. Which can be very, very excruciating, especially in the events towards public service. So many sacrifices has to be made when being a public servant, subservient, basically being a mouthpiece. The average person out there that wants to be under radar, that don't want nobody but a very, very few people to know who they are, where they live, where they live, the surrounding circumstances about their lives. So many people out there does not even have an enchanting ideal of being a public servant, of what it entails on a day-to-day, everyday level, in people's privacy being violated and never knowing from 1 hour to the next towards what nut job is going to come out of the woodwork and the next thing you know, you're targeted because of your notoriety. It's the same reason why that the people in Hollywood, more and more of them, live out in Hollywood, because they all know one another. They all know that they're celebrities. They all know that they're basically potential targets, and because of it, they have extra special security out there that protects those people that are an actor or a subservient for various reasons. We're going to end here. Like I said a while ago, the events that's unveiling themselves in all the death-defiant moments that we obviously can witness and see, and some of us even feel. We just want to say that we are in a time of trouble right now here in America, such as what most people, even at my age, has never seen on the level that it's happening right now throughout our country and throughout this planet. Thanks again for listening. Our prayers is always with you. Thank you for your time. God bless you. God bless America. God bless our troops. And shalom.